We have a special guest for you this morning to answer your questions. Zainab Williams is with us, and she is the founder of Elleverity Wealth Management. She's in Caledon, Ontario this morning. Zainab, welcome back to our program. Glad to have you back with us today.
Thank you for having me, Heather.
Listen, my computer has been blowing up with people writing in to share tips, to ask questions, to make comments. So I'm going to start with you, number one, with a comment from Floyd. And it just really captures the sentiment that we're hearing from Canadians this morning. And basically what Floyd says is that increased rates will only cause more despair. Does that echo what you're hearing from people right now with these high costs, Zainab?
Well, it's interesting that Floyd has brought this concern, and the reason why the bank actually increases rates, it's because they want to discourage consumer spending. They want to increase the borrowing rate so that you can start saving more. It might feel counterintuitive, but in the back end, it's doing a little something to encourage consumers to start looking at their money and saving and becoming more intimate with it.
And that's what we're going to do. Yes, he's talking about inflation rates and interest rates, a double whammy as far as he is concerned. One of the things that people have pointed to, and I was just talking about in introducing you, is the big jump in the price of foods. So let's begin in terms of questions there. Hearing, for example, from Carolyn. She's a healthcare worker. With the cost of living, I have cut back, she writes, on how I eat on a day-to-day basis. And she particularly mentions the price of cauliflower as being outrageous. And then that's echoed by one of our viewers named Linda, Zainab, and she talks about how she always watches for specials and sale items and bought more basic foods as opposed to things that are ready-made. What can you advise for us this morning in terms of strategies to reduce food costs?
Well, Heather, right now, a lot of families are doing a lot of financial acrobatics with their budget. And one way to help is to eat at home more often. And you can find sites like Budget Bites that will teach you how to make a meal inexpensively. And I think apps are going to be your best friends because apps like Flash Food or Too Good To Go, they are companies that have partnered with grocery stores, restaurants and bakeries to give you massive savings on food that is nearing their best before date. And I like the fact that the viewer does price match, and an app called Flip allows you to see items that are on sale, and you can price match, get rebates, and earn rewards. And for people who are looking at buying produce in bulk, it's a good thing to actually invest in a vacuum sealer because it helps you to actually save more in what you're buying and also prevent freezer burns.
So yeah, that's a good point. So you mentioned apps, which is new technology, obviously, as opposed to coupon clipping. People are still doing that, but apps can be your good friend in terms of saving money there. You know, mentioning cauliflower as being something particularly pricey, lots of times people will say maybe don't go for fresh, go for canned, go for frozen. There's some other things that are maybe a little bit less expensive. And also, it seems like it's a good strategy to have a plan when you go into a grocery store.
Exactly, Heather. Meal prepping is your go-to friend right now. You need to have a strategy. You need to start itemizing everything that you have to see what exactly you can create with what you have in your pantry before replenishing anything else.
You know, we've been covering how people are even getting into gardening again, even little garden boxes, even if they have limited space. But we heard from Vince, and he was suggesting that where Vince is, which is in Pine House, Saskatchewan, how not in a big city, but how they still rely on the land around, continue to rely on fish, on moose, and on duck. And I've heard from people in Newfoundland, Zainab, about how they forage for things now. People are looking for some pretty dramatic sorts of options.
Absolutely. And in this type of environment, you really have to think outside the box. And there are certain municipalities that can actually give you soil to help you with your planting needs and also seeds. So I like the fact that people like Vince are looking at different ways to really supplement their groceries.
I want to ask about fuel costs now, because that was the big driver of this huge inflation rate. And a number of our viewers are writing to say that they are simply driving a whole lot less. What would you suggest in terms of cutting your gas bill, Zainab?
Well, I like the fact that people are driving a lot less. They're also carpooling because what the pandemic showed us was the fact that we can use Zoom apps to really have those face-to-face meetings without actually seeing each other face to face. And an app called Gas Buddy is really great at comparing gas prices so that you can spend less on fuel.
Back to the apps again. Apps are our best
Yes.
friend in getting through these high inflation rates. Okay, so that is fuel. I want to ask a couple of questions specifically for seniors, because every time we raise these issues, we hear from our senior viewers. And here's a good example. Irene in Ontario talking about how seniors on a very fixed income. Here's Irene's comment. I guess we're expected to get jobs and keep working. That's not just a comment on how serious the concern is for seniors on a fixed income, but it makes me wonder if in these inflationary times, is that something that you would anticipate people doing, actually putting off retirement or going back into the workforce?
I have seen a lot of seniors contemplating staying longer in the workforce, or also becoming consultants at work. So instead of actually working the 9 to 5, because of their extensive experience at their jobs, they're looking at creating an income stream where they're not working as full-timers, but rather as consultants, because of the rich experience they have gained throughout the years, and they can train other people who are coming into those positions. And for some other seniors who do have a budget that can sustain deferring CPP, that's also a really good way of future-proofing your income, because if you do defer your CPP up to age 70, your payout increases by 42%.
Okay, that's good to ask. And it makes me wonder, too, Cheryl making this comment about how difficult it is to try to survive as a senior. Our pensions are not enough to live on. Rent is outrageous. We have to skip meals and buy cheaper food. I mean, that's a pretty bleak assessment for this particular viewer's life. But in terms of looking at, you mentioned CPP, seniors who may have the fortune of having, an investment portfolio that they've built to live on in their senior years. Is this a time to be looking at rebalancing anything within that portfolio?
You can certainly look at rebalancing within the portfolio if it makes sense for you based on your own financial situation. And Heather, when you said that people are skipping meals, seniors are going through a lot of financial strain, it really breaks my heart, because some of these types of strategies, you can really speak to a financial professional and a tax consultant to look at your situation from a holistic perspective, so that you can have a better understanding of where you stand and where to go.
I'd like to ask about wages as well. A couple of things have come to mind. Number one, we're covering today a strike from workers. It's affecting Union Station and potentially could affect the commute. And one of the issues, the big issue, is wages for some of these transit workers. And we're also hearing about how obviously wages and salaries aren't keeping pace with this rate of inflation. There's a company called Cisco, and it's actually made a conscious decision to divert money that it had set aside for employees' bonus incentives. And it's actually putting that into their salaries, because employees want cash in hand. They're less concerned about bonuses and incentives. So they want more in their salaries. What do you think? I mean, I don't know if there's anything that you would say to employers right now, or what do you think people need to be cognizant of when it comes to wages in this time?
Well, since they're actually increasing bonuses and putting them into the actual salaries, that of course also creates the tax implications that you have to take into account. And at this time, people are trying to survive, Heather. They're trying to see how they can stretch that dollar because of the rising costs. And for employers, it's a difficult situation to be in.
No kidding. When you say they're trying to survive, here's a telling note, Zainab, from Graham. Canada, it's been fun, and we love you, but we don't want to work so hard and sacrifice so much to be considered upper middle class, forced into poverty. Graham and his family are moving to South America as a result of what we're talking about today. Hopefully not nearly as drastic a step for many people watching. But how would you conclude? I mean, how do we focus our mindset right now, Zainab, over what's in front of us, what may continue for the foreseeable future? How do we view this time?
Heather, I think this is a time for us to be flexible with our strategies and to start really shifting our mindset around what is possible for us. If you're willing to pack up and move somewhere tropical where you can be live like a king or queen, then do so if it makes sense for you. But we do need to start shifting our mindset towards what's important to us and how we can start saving and gaining financial peace during this difficult time.
Financial peace. That sounds pretty good with 6.7% inflation just breaking this morning. Zainab, thank you so much for coming back on the program. Really appreciate your advice. And I appreciate all of the suggestions and questions from you at home today. Thanks again.
Thank you, Heather, for having me.